Welcome back. Now, in Pakistan, a high-level civil-military huddle has called on the global community to take notice of human rights violations by Indian troops in occupied Kashmir. Chaired by Prime Minister Imran Khan, the meeting reviewed internal and external security situation. It was shared that Pakistan believes in peaceful coexistence with all its neighbours. The meeting reiterated resolve to defend Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity at all costs. Defence Minister Pervez Khattak and Army Chief Qamar Javed Bajwa attended the meeting, among others. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Foreign Office has rejected India's remarks regarding elections in Gilgit-Baltistan. In a statement, the Foreign Office said baseless contentions about Gilgit-Baltistan elections cannot cover up India's atrocities in occupied Kashmir. Pakistan has said India is trying to disrupt the law and order situation in the country by supporting terrorist activities. Prime Minister Imran Khan, while speaking in Parliament on Wednesday, explicitly stated that India was behind the recent terror attack on the Stock Exchange building in Karachi. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi had also linked the attack to sleeper cells activated by India in some parts of Pakistan, including Balochistan. Now, for more on this, we're joined by Senator Anwarul Haq Kakar from Balochistan. Mr. Kakar, thank you very much for joining with us on Indus News. Now, Mr. Kakar, the recent terror attacks on security forces in Balochistan and the Karachi Stock Exchange have pointed to India's involvement. So what's your say on this?
Thank you so much for having me. To be honest with you, this is not something new. It may appear to your audience, to some of your audience, that this is a new involvement. It's a quite old, almost 2 decades, that India has been interfering in our internal affairs, in our politics, in our terror themes, in our terror attacks. And it has been recognized at the highest level by different government officials, not just from Pakistan, but Indians themselves. American Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel has publicly said that Indians are using the farm soil to destabilize Pakistan, particularly in our province. And then you must recall when Prime Minister Modi chose Republic Day's address to tell his international audience that people from so-called people from JB and Balochistan are asking for his help. So it was a confessional statement on his part. And then one of the biggest achievement in the intelligence history of this country, that we apprehended a serving officer, Mr. Kulbhushan Yadav, on the soil of Balochistan in the year probably 2015 or 16, I don't exactly remember the year. And that case has been taken to International Court of Justice by the Indian state. So Indian involvement has a systematic pattern, and they have been exposed at different stages. And there is a lot of circumstantial evidence where these terrorist outfits by the name of BLA, BLF, Lashkar-e-Balochistan and the rest, VRA, all of them are being financed. They've been given targets. They have been given directions. They are pure proxies in the hands of, unfortunately, Indian intelligence outfit RAW.
Right. So, Mr. Kakar, do you think India is trying to divert the attention from internal chaos and the border tensions with China by fanning terrorism in Balochistan?
I do not have a slightest doubt in my mind. To be honest with you, India is facing an existential threat, not just from the Naxal movement, the situation in Kashmir, the situation in the post this act of citizenship, and there is a rise of deep resentment within the general minorities, be it Muslims, Sikhs, Dalits, Adivasis, and the rest of the group. And their over-ambitiousness, where they have put themselves as a strong candidate to contain China in the region to the Western Hemisphere, it is badly haunting them, whatever has happened recently in Ladakh. So all of this has put the Indian Hindutva jingoism on the defensive as they've not been able to realize those stated targets. So that has created a kind of a pressure where they want to show some sort of a success for their own domestic political agenda, and that's how they try to stir and encourage their proxies within the province of Balochistan, and that's how they would be able to address some of the anxieties of its own extremist Hindutva constituents.
And Mr. Kakar, do you think India's intelligence agency RAW is on a mission to target the China-Pakistan economic corridor?
I mean, their National Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval, has been public on these positions, and India is the only country which has publicly opposed that it would resist CPAC and BRI under this pretext that the so-called it is passing through the land or the area which they are claiming that it's theirs. So their opposition is public. It's not hidden. It's not covert. And RAW is their one of the tools which they apply to disturb, deter, and achieve things which they, according to their plan, they think is in their strategic interest.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Kakar, for your time. Now, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has briefed Pakistani counterpart Shah Mahmood Qureshi about the latest regional situation. Speaking over the phone, Yi acknowledged Pakistan's efforts to promote peace and stability in the region. Wang Yi thanked Islamabad for the support it has extended to China during testing times. Meanwhile, Qureshi said India is jeopardizing regional peace through its expansionist policies. He said Islamabad remains committed to one China policy and firmly supports Beijing on its core interests, including Hong Kong and Tibet. Qureshi also briefed Chinese Foreign Minister about India's repeated ceasefire violations across the line of control. The two ministers reiterated resolve to deepen strategic consultation and coordination at all levels. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 78 more people have died of COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, with the death toll rising to 4,551. The Health Ministry said some 4,000 new cases were detected, taking the tally of infections to nearly 222,000. The ministry said nearly 114,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. Officials said 2,479 patients are critically ill. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has tested positive for the COVID-19. In a tweet, the Foreign Minister said he will continue his duties from home. The United States has reported a record 53,096 new cases of COVID-19 over the past 24 hours as the total number of infections climbed past 2.7 million. Brazil surpassed 60,000 deaths from the coronavirus after recording more than 1,000 fatalities in the last 24 hours. The virus has killed over 521,000 people worldwide and infected more than 10.8 million. This report has more details.
The new coronavirus is once again surging in the Americas, especially the United States. The number of confirmed cases in the U.S. climbed to an all-time high of more than 50,000 for the second consecutive day. 40 out of 50 states are now reporting a spike in new infections as the country struggles to handle the pandemic. As cases skyrocket in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott has made face covering mandatory in all public places.
One of the best ways to keep businesses open while also slowing the spread is for everyone to wear a face covering like this when they go out. Medical studies have shown that wearing a face covering slows the spread of COVID-19 and it protects you and your family.
Meanwhile, in Africa, the Nigerian state of Kano ended its lockdown months after the outbreak, originally called a mysterious disease, killing hundreds of citizens. Ghana has pardoned 794 prisoners as part of measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in cluttered prisons. The World Health Organization has urged African governments to take effective measures to mitigate the risk of a surge in infections. The Global Health Body also said there is very little risk that pets can infect their owners with COVID-19. In Asia, South Korea has reported 63 new coronavirus cases, triggering the return of tighter social distancing curbs in Seoul.
It is concerning as small clusters are emerging in wide range of areas, making it harder for local governments and prevention workers doing epidemiological surveys.
Tokyo has confirmed 107 new coronavirus infections, its highest daily tally in 2 months. But Japan's chief cabinet secretary said there is no need to reintroduce a state of emergency.
In India, the number of people infected with COVID-19 has surpassed 625,000 with more than 18,000 deaths. The Federal Health Ministry says 379 deaths were reported in the past 24 hours. The ministry said that nearly 30,000 new cases were reported overnight. Officials said recoveries have now crossed 379,000, raising the country's recovery rate to 60.7% from 59.4%. The number of active cases across the country is more than 227,000. The western state of Maharashtra also saw a record jump in infections, with 6,330 new cases, pushing its total over 186,000. Officials said there is an increase in the number of people with no symptoms testing positive for the coronavirus. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. France's President Emmanuel Macron has named Jean Castex as his new prime minister in efforts to reinvent his administration and win back voters. The centre-right politician served for 2 years as the second highest ranking official in the Élysée Palace during Nicolas Sarkozy's presidency. This comes after Prime Minister Edouard Philippe and his government resigned ahead of Macron's planned cabinet reshuffle. Last month, Macron said he wanted to start afresh as France embarks on a delicate and costly recovery from its coronavirus slump. Earlier last week, Macron lost big in the nationwide municipal elections, being seen as a referendum on his policies. His party failed to win a single major city, depriving the president of a local power base ahead of 2022. Washington has expressed concern over Beijing's military exercises in the South China Sea. It accused China of further destabilizing the disputed waters. In a statement, the Defense Department said holding drills in the disputed territory was counterproductive to the efforts for easing tensions. The Pentagon said the exercises will assert unlawful maritime claims and disadvantage Beijing's Southeast Asian neighbors in the region. This comes after Beijing started 5 days of drills from July 1st near the Paracel Islands, which are claimed by both Vietnam and China. Washington accuses Beijing of militarizing South China Sea to intimidate its neighbors who might want to exploit its extensive oil and gas reserves. Beijing claims 90% of the energy-rich waters, but Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan and Vietnam also lay partial claims. China has rejected U.S. criticism over its military exercises in the South China Sea. Beijing says Washington was responsible for increased tensions in the region. China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian's non-regional countries conducting military exercises in the area are affecting its stability. Zhao did not name any countries, but the U.S. has conducted multiple freedom of navigation operations by sending its warships through the area. This comes after the Pentagon slammed Beijing, saying the exercises will assert Beijing's unlawful maritime claims. Washington accuses Beijing of militarizing the South China Sea to intimidate its neighbors who might want to exploit its extensive oil and gas reserves. Beijing started 5 days of drills from July 1st near the Paracel Island, which are claimed by both Vietnam and China. Now, the United States is looking to seize the fuel aboard 4 Iranian tankers bound for Venezuela to ramp up pressure on both sanctions-hit countries. The Columbia District Court issued a warrant to confiscate over 1.1 million barrels of gasoline after a civil lawsuit was filed. The U.S. Justice Department said the warrant is based on the probable cause that the fuel aboard vessels Bella, Bering, Pandy and Lena is forfeitable. The lawsuit also aims to stop the flow of oil sale revenues to Tehran, which remains under U.S. sanctions over its nuclear program. Legal experts say the gasoline can only be seized if the tankers enter U.S. territorial waters and if Washington can prove the gasoline to be forfeitable under law. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro remains defiant in the face of United States attempts to oust him through diplomatic and economic measures. The Saudi-led military coalition says it has destroyed 4 explosive-laden drones launched by the Houthis in Saudi Arabia's direction. The Kingdom State media said the drones were intercepted over territory controlled by the Houthis in Yemen. On Wednesday, the coalition announced the launch of a new military operation against the Houthis after they stepped up drone attacks on Saudi Arabia. Last week, Houthi fighters fired missiles that reached Riyadh in the first such assault since a 6-week ceasefire expired in May. The coalition said it intercepted the attack. At least 19 people have been killed after a train ran over a passenger wagon at a crossing in Sheikhupura city of Punjab province. Police say majority of those travelling in the passenger wagon were Sikh pilgrims visiting Pakistan. They said the Shah Hussain Express was headed from Karachi to Lahore city. It collided with the van close to Farooqabad railway station. Police say around 25 passengers were on board the wagon. The injured have been shifted to a nearby hospital, expressing great grief over the loss of lives. Prime Minister Imran Khan has ordered the best medical care for the injured. In India, one of the most wanted criminals have killed 8 policemen, including 4 officers in northern Uttar Pradesh state. UP Police Director General H.C. Awasthi says 5 others have been wounded. Police had raided Bikru village in Kanpur district to arrest Vikas Dubey, a dreaded gangster facing 60 criminal cases, including murder. Dubey and his gang blocked all roads leading to the village. They ambushed the raiding police with indiscriminate firing from rooftops. Awasthi said the slain officers include a deputy superintendent and 3 sub-inspectors. A series of explosions at a fireworks factory in northwest Turkey have killed 4 people and wounded 73 others. Officials said over 100 people were trapped by the blasts and emergency services were unable to reach the building in Sakarya province. The Disaster and Emergency Management Directorate described the incident as an industrial accident. The initial blast was heard up to 50 kilometers away. Now, Turkey has accused the United Arab Emirates of embarking on a campaign to stifle democratic movements in the Middle East and North Africa. Turkey's ambassador to UN Feridun Sinirlioglu called on the Security Council to remind the UAE of its duty under international law. Sinirlioglu said Abu Dhabi is excessively ambitious to dominate the wider region, which is resulting in nothing but human suffering. So the UAE must stop its destructive and malicious policies in the region. The UAE is part of a Saudi-led coalition that launched an air campaign to roll back Houthi territorial gains in 2015. This further escalated the crisis in Yemen. The Turkish envoy also accused Abu Dhabi of supporting Khalifa Haftar's forces in Libya, wanting to oust the UN-recognized government in the country. Qatar has once again rejected Israel's annexation plan, Jewish settlements and the Judaization of Jerusalem. A team led by Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh met with Qatar's Foreign Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani in Doha. The team praised Doha for supporting the Palestinian people. Al Thani said Qatar will continue to support all efforts to ensure national unity in Palestine. Israel's new government is expected to present its strategy this month for implementing the deal of the century proposed by US President Donald Trump. The plan gives Israel a free hand to annex large parts of the West Bank, including the Jordan Valley, which Israel occupied in 1967. Meanwhile, Palestine's political factions and pro-Palestine activists have protested in the occupied territories and abroad against Israel's annexation plans. Moving on to Libya, where 6 more corpses have been unearthed from mass graves in the western city of Tarhuna. In a statement, Libya's government said the bodies were unearthed during ongoing excavation work. The statement said a total of 30 corpses have been found in Tarhuna so far. Libyan authorities have announced that there were 11 mass graves in and around the city. The Libyan army recently inflicted heavy blows on Khalifa Haftar's forces and liberated the cities of Tripoli and Tarhuna. Libya has been torn by civil war since the ouster of late ruler Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. The International Organization for Migration says the Libyan Coast Guard rescued 102 illegal immigrants off the country's western coast. IOM said its staff will provide assistance to Libyan Coast Guard at the disembarkation point. The organization said nearly 300 migrants were rescued by the Coast Guard in the past day. IOM estimates that more than 5,400 immigrants have been rescued and returned to Libya so far in 2020. The state of violence in Libya makes the country a preferred point of departure for thousands of illegal immigrants wanting to cross into Europe. The chair of the African Union Commission has urged Ethiopians to refrain from violence following the death of singer Hakalu Hundessa. This comes after the protest that followed Hundessa's death claimed at least 81 lives. In a statement, Musa Faki Mohammed also called on the government of Ethiopia to bring the perpetrators to justice. He said the Commission encourages all sides to resolve differences through dialogue and peaceful means. Mohammed reaffirmed support for the Ethiopian government in their effort to promote a stable and prosperous country. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has warned he will not tolerate any further destruction of public property and infrastructure. Internet service remains suspended across the country since Tuesday. Now, Venezuela has reversed an earlier decision to expel the EU ambassador in response to the bloc's sanctions on Caracas. President Nicolas Maduro says the step has been taken after agreeing with the bloc to maintain the framework of diplomatic relations. Maduro said Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza and EU's Foreign Minister Josep Borrell spoke over a phone call to resolve the issue. Speaking at a military event in Caracas, he said it was an appropriate decision as the world will get to hear the truth about Venezuela.
Foreign Minister Arreaza has informed Joseph Borrell that as the President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, I have decided to suspend the expulsion of the European Union ambassador in Caracas to publish a joint communique between both institutions, like we've done, and to proceed to a new stage of dialogue between the High Representative, Joseph Borrell, and the Foreign Minister of the Bolivarian Republic, Jorge Arreaza.
The European Court of Human Rights has condemned the treatment of 3 men asylum seekers living in France. In a judgment, the court described their living conditions as inhuman and degrading. The court concluded that officials had failed in their duties and that the 3 men had been living on the street without shelter or resources of any kind. They had been sleeping without access to sanitary facilities and in constant fear of being attacked or robbed for several months. The judgment is based on Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The judgment also imposed a monetary penalty on the state, obliging it to pay each of the 3 asylum seekers between 10,000 and 12,000 euros. Russia says its S-500 Prometheus defense system will be capable of destroying hypersonic weapons in near-Earth space. In a statement, Russian Aerospace Forces Commander Sergei Surovikin said the S-500 is a first-generation space defense network. Surovikin said the air defense system currently has no equivalent in the world, as it can also destroy aerodynamic and ballistic targets. He said the weapon's main task will include combating medium-range ballistic missiles and intercontinental ballistic missiles in close proximity. The Prometheus, also known as Triumphator M, is a universal combination of long-range and high-altitude interception with increased missile defense potential. Russia's defense ministry says the cutting-edge defense system will be deployed in 2021. A UN-led report has found that the world dumped a record 53.6 million tons of e-waste in 2019. The Global E-Waste Monitor 2020 report said just 17.4% of the waste was recycled. The report found that China, with 10.1 million tons, was the biggest contributor to e-waste, and the US was second with 6.9 million tons. It said India comes third with 3.2 million tons. Global warming is just one issue cited by the report, as it noted 98 million tons of carbon dioxide was released into the atmosphere due to inadequate recycling. This year's coronavirus lockdowns have exacerbated the problem. Social media platform Twitter is dropping the terms master, slave and blacklist in favor of more inclusive language. The terms are frequently used in programming codes which originated decades ago. Experts say replacing the terms can cost millions and take months. In programming speak, master refers to a main version of code that controls the slaves or replicas. Blacklist is used to describe items that are automatically denied, typically forbidden websites. US bank JP Morgan has also announced a similar move following the killing of George Floyd by police in Minneapolis. Global brands are also looking carefully at their product logos and names to avoid racial stereotyping. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. The South American trade bloc has held a virtual summit to finalize its impending trade agreement with the European Union, among other agenda issues. In a joint statement, the Southern Common Market Alliance agreed to introduce a collective policy to tackle the economic and social impacts of COVID-19. The MERCOSUR members also discussed the trade deals with Canada, Singapore and South Korea, along with reviewing adjustments to their common external tariff. Ministers also deliberated the final text of a trade agreement with the EU ahead of a summit meeting with Brussels. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro called on the negotiators to conclude the final text so that it can be signed this semester. Bolsonaro reassured the bloc that he was working to undo the damage caused by his administration's policies on the Amazon and its indigenous people.
The historic success is celebrated in 2019 with the European Union and the European Trade Association show that we are on the right path. We applaud the dedication of the Paraguayan presidency to completing the outstanding details in these accords. I appeal to all the presidents so that, as I did myself, you instruct your negotiators to finish the texts.
European stocks are rather muted despite unbeat economic data out of the US and China, while a spike in US coronavirus infections tempered optimism. The pan-European stock 600 is hovering just below the flat line, with tech stocks leading gains only to be annulled by falling banks. London's FTSE traded over 1% lower as hopes of a trade deal with the EU dwindled. Paris's CAC 40 dropped nearly 1% after French Prime Minister and his government resigned. Reeling behind, Germany's DAX also traded fractionally lower as the country reported a 40% plunge in car sales in the country. Earlier Asian stocks advanced after a survey showed that China's services sector grew at its fastest pace in over a decade in June. Now let's have a look at how the weather is around the globe. With the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News. Take care.